All point of views expressed on Shop Talk 360 are solely the point of views of the individuals and do not represent any company, organization, or group. Shop Talk 360, the industry's dedicated platform for commercial design, construction, and facilities. With more than 25 years building for national retail brands, an award-winning and best-selling author, keynote speaker, industry coach, and event producer, here's our host of Shop Talk 360, Grace Daly.
Hey, Shop Talkers. Welcome to a brand new year. I'm very excited to have a very special guest join us. He's been on Shop Talk 360 many times in the past. I've served on many of my panels before in the past with various industry conferences. Please give a warm welcome I'm giving you a warm welcome to Thomas Mitchell, Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of FM3IS, which is a small facility management, advisory, consulting, and management assistant firm. Thomas, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Grace. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I always enjoy our conversation.
I am so excited. Every time you're one of a handful of folks in this industry that every time we talk, I walk away learning something. So I'm always super stoked. And I'm sure my listeners remember you from past podcasts, but there's so much you have done for our industry. You know, everything from your involvement as a IFMA fellow to everything you do to your speaking throughout the world, you know, on behalf of the FM industry. So excited. So thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome, ma'am. I'm certainly glad to be here.
Okay, now I'm going to jump into these questions. And the first question I have for you, Thomas, is what do you think the new year will bring for our facilities industry?
You know, I think the new year, Grace, is going to bring the same opportunities as the last year brought. As you know, because you're a member of our industry, there are a lot of challenges out there, but facility managers have a way of turning these challenges into opportunities. And those opportunities, I think, include, right at the top of the list, information technology. One of the things that I've noticed, and it's not just here in the U.S., but across the globe, as I get a chance to meet and share with different facility management professionals like you and I, is that all of our advanced societies have gotten to the point where they're expecting information much quicker. They're expecting services much better. They're expecting accountability much more seriously. And IT has enabled facility practitioners across the globe to deliver better value to those that we serve, whether they're our stakeholders or the end users.
Definitely. So you see us play more of a role with utilizing IT to its fullest potential. I feel like the last decade we utilized IT, but it's been a lot of data compiling as opposed to actually doing something with that data.
That's a very good point, because one of the things that I have noticed and I've continued to stress as much as possible is helping our senior leaders, the ones who are responsible for the organizations that we support or work in, to make informed decisions driven by data as opposed to desire. Having the data is important, but it doesn't do anyone any good unless you can take that data and apply it in terms of knowledge that can now lead to action that's going to enhance the value and use of your real property portfolio. Now we're at a point where we can finally capture pertinent data as it relates to facility performance, whether it's your standard HVAC system that can now monitor at a zonal level what the overall ambient temperature and humidity factor is in a given built space, how your systems are performing across their life cycle so they are now providing that kind of service, or knowing exactly where the problems are so you can now take action. so that you can put corrective fixes in place, which might include replacement, not just the building systems, but maybe the facilities themselves. Let me share with you something that I shared with the State Department. It's been a very good year for our firm. One of the year-end contracts we won was in-service training provided to facility management leaders who are responsible for all of the embassies and the consulates that the U.S. has overseas. And I told them, from a standpoint of life cycle facility performance, here's a real simple performance measure. 72 degrees Fahrenheit, 50% humidity. That is considered room temperature by and large by most people who live in advanced societies. If a built space is able to attain that temperature, then the occupants tend not to focus on the environmental conditions. They're now able to freely focus on the task at hand in the space that it was designed for. So if it's a lunchroom, guess what? You'll be able to enjoy your hamburger or your salad without wondering if it's too hot or too cold. Office space, office floor. There's so many organizations that lose productivity because the occupants are very uncomfortable in the spaces that were provided for them. So you have constant work breaks every 15 minutes, sometimes 10 minutes. You yourself may have been in a space where it was just too cold to operate. So now you're putting a jacket on to try to be comfortable. Well, now we have the technology to be able to measure that level of performance on an ongoing basis. And if you know how your facility is performing and you've established benchmarks in terms of where you want it to firm, now you can come up with ways of making investments based on informed decision-making, using that data to lead to the overall end result.
Absolutely. And it's, I love what you said earlier, data versus desire. It's just all should be based on data.
Absolutely. Whether it's benchmark data from some other organization or historical data that your own organization has accumulated over a period of time. You know, it would be wonderful that we could just go with our endocrine psychology, as they call it, or your gut feeling, and say, I wish to make an addition to this facility at X amount of dollars because it feels right. Well, if it's you writing the check, okay, you have the authority to make it happen. But if you have to convince somebody for them to allocate the resources to make that addition, well, you might have to go with more than a desire to do so. You need to convince them what is the ROI. Why should we do this as opposed to a myriad of other options that are available? And that's where the data really comes into play. And now that we have the technology and the wherewithal and even the desire, no pun intended, to use this data on our facility performance, we can offer very credible and valid recommendations to those who would be willing to resource all of these improvements to the portfolio.
That's amazing. And so that's in a work environment per se. Now we take it into another area, specific industry, such as retail, and what's going on with IT there. That adds a whole other layer of dimension to our discussion, because there's so much going on now with, obviously everyone knows the retail landscape is changing. So now there's also, and then there's retail brick and mortar that's being infused with technology into the actual physical spaces. So there's a whole IT talk there, and how shoppers shop, and how long they're in the store, and how long they're in a specific aisle, and so on and so forth, beacon technology. So, it'll be interesting to see how that further develops this year.
Absolutely. And for those who may think that FM would not be involved in virtual retailing, well, again, because all of these servers, have to be someplace. I know a lot of people talk about the cloud, and yes, these are non-electrical wired connections where the data is flowing from some type of device to some type of central location. But that central location actually has a physical location.
Yes,
that
it does.
Data centers That means it has to be climatically controlled. That means you have to have continual power
Yes.
and backup power, so forth and so on. So we're going to be involved wherever the commerce is occurring, whether it's in brick and mortar or it's going to be happening over your iPad. We are going to be involved. So, again, these are exciting times for facility practitioners if we recognize the value that we provide in order to enable, in this particular case, the retail industry to grow at exponential levels like we've been experiencing. I think this past holiday was one of the best years for virtual as well as brick and mortar retail in this country.
Yes, it has.
What? There was an FM person or person somewhere behind the scenes.
That's
to ensure
right.
the power was going and that data was going.
You bring up a very, very good point, something that I've always been impressing upon many folks that I coach when there's that concern about, the ever-changing landscape of retail. But the bottom line is this, the face of retail is changing, but there is still a physical plant. There is still a distribution center to support those online sales. There's always going to be a physical plant. And I think people sometimes lose sight of that because there are some stores that are closing. But again, it's closing, but then there are other things that take its place. There are new concepts out there, or there's more online sales. There's more distribution centers being built, so on and so forth. So it's kind of, it's just a change. It's just an evolution.
Absolutely. And we'll still be there.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yep.
I think I'm putting my retail hat back on, but we used to always say in facilities, first ones to turn on the lights and the last ones to turn them off. We'll always be there.
Absolutely.
Okay, very exciting stuff. Now, second question.
Okay.
If there was one thing that we should focus on as an industry that would bring maximum and immediate benefits and growth to our industry, what would be that one thing, Thomas, and why?
I would have to say it would be something, and please forgive me if it sounds like a shameless plug, but our firm recently offered a fixed service offering. And it's actually called asset preservation. And let me share what that means. You and I have talked about this before, and we both agree that the most valuable resource available to any organization, whether it's an FM-based one or otherwise, are the people.
Yes. Yes.
Processes are important. Product clearly is important. And we've already talked about the value of performance, but it's people that make it happen. And it turns out, based on U.S. federal data, as well as information that I've gleaned from my travels over in Europe, that the two most valuable assets within any organization is going to be the workforce and the workplace. Now, the top three expensive items tend to be us because in a capitalistic society, you have to pay us for our services. Thank you very much. Also, the overall real property footprint. Like you said, Amazon has huge distribution centers. Well, that costs money, too. So that's going to be pretty high when it comes to that balance sheet. The other part of it tends to be whatever services or products that organization is providing. So if it's a Department of Defense contractor, yes, if they're producing missiles and ships and tanks and so forth and so on, yeah, they have a pretty hefty price tag. But guaranteed, the workplace and the workforce will be within the top three of the most valuable and the most expensive assets that organizations have. Well, we've seen over the last decade that the new normal is we're not going to be getting as many dollars as we used to when it came to advancing the success of our organization. Budgets are just getting tighter. And even with the Dow reaching 25,000 points, another record, there's still not a lot of cash available in order for people to do everything that they would like to do. So they have to make decisions on what are the priorities. What's the most important thing we must take care of to ensure our organizational longevity? Okay, what's number two? What's number three? The decisions are being made to allocate whatever resources are available to take care of that in priority order. Anything that doesn't make it above the cut line, it may have to get deferred. We know that when it comes to maintenance actions within our facility.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we recognize that the workforce and the workplace are two of an organization's most valuable assets, then we ought to take deliberate actions to safeguard both against the risk of harm and loss.
Mm-hmm.
What we talked about before we had this discussion was, unfortunately, the active shooter incidents that are happening within our country. It was bad enough in terms of what occurred out in Las Vegas a couple of months back. I mean, so many people were killed or hurt. But now, here in Texas, just about a month or so ago, we had a mass shooting in a religious facility, a church, which tells me that there is no facility, no organization that's immune to an individual who've already made a decision that they're going to harm the occupant. This means that we as facility professionals are really going to have to pay a lot of deliberate attention to doing what is necessary so that we can be good stewards of the people and the property that have been entrusted to our care. We need to do what is necessary to ensure the protection of both of them. So that now means we're going to focus on personnel safety and security. As long as they're within our facilities, that's a responsibility of ours. We may not be the lead for it. You know, there's security forces and, you know, security organizations within some of our large places. But still, if it's going to occur within the built environment, we need to be involved in that discussion and conversation, particularly when it comes to actions in order to protect both. Emergency planning and preparedness. I mean, you and I know Anthony extremely well. He's in the business continuity as well as emergency preparedness. That hasn't gone away. And even though we may have an increase of active shooters occurring within this country, we've also had some natural disasters we've had to contend with. I think they were called Harvey, Irma, and Maria.
Yes. I know Irma well. She visited us in South Florida.
I bet you do. And I know we know Harvey over here in Texas. And one of the things I've noticed about natural disasters, they have no respect of jurisdictional boundaries. They will come to you regardless of who you are or what you do. So I think that it's going to be critically important for us to make sure that as facility professionals and practitioners, we need to focus an opportunity on preserving and protecting the most valuable resources that belong to the organizations we support, the people and the property. And I recognize that property can be replaced. I mean, we're still going through the recovery effort here in Texas when it comes to Harvey. And unfortunately, Puerto Rico is still recovering from all of the damage that happened as a result of Maria. But people can't be replaced. Once they're gone, they're gone. And I don't think we should lose sight of that. And I think we ought to be in the forefront of making sure that we're providing solutions focused on protecting our personnel.
No, that's so important. And do you feel, Thomas, that would you say that most organizations, or does it depend on the size of the organization? From your experience, would you feel that most organizations are indeed recognizing how important it is to have these procedures in place? Or is it more kind of like they have, I hate to say this, but I'm just going to say it, they just have it as a SOP, standard operating procedure. You know, they have it there, but they're not really actively engaged to update it or to engage with it or to, you know, get other departments more aligned with it. I mean, what are you seeing out there as you work with other organizations, big and small?
It's been my experience that those organizations that truly recognize the risk of not doing so are the ones that tend to have programs and personnel in place to minimize the risk of it ever happening. And I'll give you an example of it. After 9/11, everybody in this country was paying attention to what they should be doing in order to safely evacuate a building. Who would have thought something like that would have happened? But it took a tragic event an unlikely event for folks to wake up and realize, you know what, perhaps we've been complacent. So across the board, everybody was starting to look at their emergency preparedness and evacuation plan. But, of course, 9/11, that was 2001, so that's 16 years ago. We got the people who don't even remember that are alive right now.
That's right.
So then it boils down to specific situations that may have occurred within a regional area. For example, when Andrews hit Florida back in 1992, yes, there was a major change in Florida building code because now you realize that the strength of the threat is even more than you had originally experienced. So now actions were being taken in order to help these facilities withstand a storm of that magnitude. Then you have Sandy that hit New York and New Jersey. So those codes started getting strengthened to prevent another superstorm from having that type of damage. Even with our discussion when it comes to these active shooters, now organizations that are in that immediate vicinity are recognizing, hey, that could have been me. So they're taking it seriously. Now, there's some organizations that have done it for a long time. Schools are a perfect example. Most schools are designed such that their gymnasiums are large areas where people can gather, are rated so that if they need to serve as a shelter to the public, they're available to do so. That is a simple reason for it. And I'd like to say it was for altruistic reasons. And I'm sure there's some elected officials who recognize that, hey, when people are scared and they need a place to go, we need to provide a place for it. That's what government's for, to protect the people. So there's another part of it, too. You have children. So do I. We want to make sure our kids are safe and sound when they're outside of our care. So we have an expectation for our schools to be built so that they can serve as that protective layer for our children against harm. That's why, out of all of the organizations that tend to do fire drills and evacuation drills, schools always rate the highest, particularly elementary schools. Because, again, we recognize the risk of what could happen if they don't pay attention to it. So I wish everybody across every industry, within every facility type, would take this as seriously as they should. But the reality is, unless they've experienced some type of horrific tragedy or had to endure some type of disaster, they tend not to focus on it as much as they could or should.
Yeah. Yep. And do you think that's budget-driven in the organizations?
I think so. I think so. I think so. I do. I do. But it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, prioritization. Okay, you got to decide what's most important to you. So do you want to run the risk of having children in the facility that's not ready to withstand a standard or a severe storm that has already occurred in this immediate location or has the potential of occurring? No, because of the lawsuits and so forth and so on afterwards. So guess what? Even though we don't have as much money as we'd like to do, we're going to make sure that we reinforce this particular room as opposed to the entire facility so that it can serve as a shelter in the storm. So you'll make decisions on what space will be fortified as opposed to the entire facility.
Entire facility, yep. Okay, very interesting. Wow. Asset protection. Preservation is what you said, actually.
Asset preservation, absolutely. It was not something that we took lightly, and admittedly, personally, I wasn't very comfortable delving into this area. I mean, when I was on active duty in the Air Force, I did spend a quarter of my career in the emergency services arena. So we're talking fire department, explosive ordnance disposal like bomb squad, as well as installation readiness or municipality readiness. And I enjoyed serving in that particular sector of the FM industry. But I ain't like it because guess what? Folks tend to get hurt. And I'm really empathic. I don't like being around that because I will feel whatever it is that those who are going through these challenges are experiencing. That's why I could never be a medical doctor. I could not be dispassionate about that. But I recognize that guess what? Since we, as facility professionals, are responsible for ensuring the functionality of these built spaces through the integration of people, place, technology, and process, then we also need to focus our attention on the protection as well. Because there will be times when some type of emergency will come our way, some threat. It has the potential of coming across our doorstep. And the ostrich approach, putting your head down in the sand and hoping it'll just go around you or go away, is not reasonable, and it's not proven. So that's why we made a collective decision, and the firm said, okay, we have a number of individuals that have these skill sets. Let's at least make it available. And if folks take advantage of it, then we can do so. And we already have a church that we're working with right now that is taking this seriously. This church happens to be in Texas. San Antonio is about 40 miles away from where that mass shooting occurred. So, yes, absolutely. And we'll see where it goes.
Yep. It's preparing for the new reality.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Last question. Please share with us some action steps FM should take for the new year that would not only help their personal development, but also their businesses as well.
Well, I've been excited about that third question.
I know. You love, because you love the industry, and you're just so awesome in the industry. So I can't wait to hear the answers.
You are too kind, ma'am. Well, of course, you know me. I have to start with a leader. The timing of our conversation is extremely interesting to me. We have a number of individuals who have likely identified resolutions that they're going to stick to for this new calendar year. Good for them, and I hope they're able to hold. And I thought about your question. I said, well, how does that apply to FM? I certainly don't want to focus on an individual's action. I'd like to look at it from a more holistic perspective, one that could benefit our industry. And I thought about a simple analogy. You say we have somebody who wants to lose 25 pounds within the next 3 months. Okay.
That would be me.
Me too, as a matter of fact.
Especially after the holidays.
That's what I say. 3 months. Okay, that's 90 days, 25 pounds. Okay, so that's about a little less than 3 pounds a day. Okay, that's doable. Okay. And, of course, you and I know that it's going to be a combination of exercise. It's going to be a combination of eating right. It's going to be a combination of getting our rest. Okay. Well, those are broad strokes. And 3 months, as you and I know, can come and go just like that. So that means we need to develop a plan of action. And I mean we break it down to the calorie. What are the kind of foods that we should eat throughout the day so our body doesn't think we're starving ourselves? And it provides the necessary nutrients that not only allows us to conduct the actions that we need because we have fuel that can sustain our bodies, but also what are some of the other things that we should be doing? Because, again, it's going to be a threefold process. We have to get our rest, we have to get our exercise in, and we also have to eat properly. Well, my mind does not work as well as it used to. I really have to write things down, whether physically or virtually. And I need a calendar so that now I know this time is set aside to do this. These are the kind of foods that I'm allowed to eat. These are the ones that I need to make sure I have available so when that hunger does come, I'm not reaching for junk, but I'm going for the right food. I actually did shopping for lunch next week just to make sure that I can maintain the calorie level that I'm allowed to do so that I can reach my goal. Okay. So as an example of something I'm personally going through in order to reach a goal of mine, a real goal, and, hey, hopefully it will happen. Well, how does this translate to facility management? I mean, we're responsible for ensuring the functionality of the built environment through the integration of people, place, process, and technology. What does that story have to do with what you just said, Tom? Well, I'm glad you asked, Rick. Unfortunately, an area of our profession, a competency, if you will, is not exercised as well as it should, particularly when it comes to helping an organization achieve its long-term goals. And that, my friend, is strategic facility management planning. Interestingly enough, last year I got a chance to go down to Trinidad and Tobago. There was a conference that was there, and that was the topic of discussion. Recently, well, not so recently, back in late October, I was asked to actually offer about a week's worth of training, as I mentioned earlier, to State Department senior facility managers. That was one of the major topics that they wanted to discuss. In San Antonio, February, next month, I'll be giving a very similar presentation to the military as well as civilian sector facility managers that are coming with the Society of American Military Engineers, IFMA, FM workshop. This is big. It really is big because any organization that really wants to be available to provide the products and services that are needed by those individuals who would receive them needs to think about what do they want to accomplish, whether it's in the short term or in the long term. And as I mentioned earlier, since facilities tend to be in the top 3 of the most expensive assets available to an organization, and that workforce, to include our facility practitioners, also are included in that top 3, and we need to have a strategic focus as well. If the organization has a goal, say, for an example, we want to be the organization that attracts the best talent available in a given industry. Well, it would stand to reason that the kind of facilities that are available for those individuals that are attracted are such that they're supporting their desire to stay once they come there. I don't know too many people who are comfortable buying a dilapidated facility without any interest in upgrading it to provide a level of comfort that they're used to having. Most people will turn away from a restaurant, as you know, that does not have a good outward appearance. If there's trash leading up to the entrance, if there's an aroma that's not good-smelling food once you come in, if the tables are dirty, if the staff is ill-prepared and not focusing on customer needs, chances are that might be the last time you go into that organization. Switching to churches, I know from personal experience that you might have a wonderful worship opportunity and love what's being shared and the fellowship among all of those who are there for the same reason. But if you go into that restroom and there's no toilet paper and you really need it, that might be the last time you go there.
Sure, absolutely.
So facilities have a critical enabling role in the success of an organization. So if that organization has long-term objectives, we need to make sure that we are doing things so that we can help our decision makers recognize what the criteria should be as in terms of their facility performance so that it now aligns with achieving the organizational goal. We also have to recognize what we have to avoid during the strategic planning process so that we don't stay so deep into the weeds that we lose sight of the big picture. Here's some interesting stats I wanted to share with you. Did you know that 20% of an organization's income statements are in the areas of real estate and facility expenses?
20%.
20%? 35% of an organization's balance sheet assets are real estate and facility. 35%. Again, we're always in the top 3. And for those who are environmentally conscious, and I try to be as much as I can, 48% of an organization's greenhouse gas emissions are produced by buildings. So either way you slice it, whether it's deliberately or reluctantly, we are going to be involved when it comes to an organization achieving its strategy, otherwise known as a plan of action, whereby people allocate resources used to direct operations that lead to achieving a goal. And as ISMA has pointed out in several publications that they produced in the past, one of the key trends in the outlooks that face our industry is making sure that we are major contributors to this process.
Mm-hmm.
And strategic planning specifically is an organizational management process. This is about leadership here.
Mm-hmm.
And their ability to envision a desired future and translating that vision into broadly defined performance goals and objectives and a sequence of steps to achieve them. So as I had used the illustration earlier about what I need to do to reduce my 25 pounds of tonnage within 3 months, we need to do the same thing when it comes to strategic planning. And when it comes to facilities, we need to set those priorities on what areas need the resourcing in order for the portfolio now to perform so that now it's a critical enabler of the organization's objectives. We need to focus on where the energy and the resources need to be applied. What can we do to strengthen organizational operations? How can we help people work better, more efficiently, more effectively? How can we ensure members and stakeholders are all working towards a common goal based on the allocation of the space and their placement within that space? And how can we now establish agreements among all of the stakeholders, not just the facility department and every single person that works in it, but those that we work with or work for? How can we establish agreements so that we all collectively come together and agree on what the intended outcomes and results should be when it comes to how their facility should be working for them? This is big. Organizations that have strategic plans tend to be very successful ones. Why? Because as I mentioned, I've spent a little time in the military, and there's a general who I've long admired, George S. Patton. He put in his staff during World War II, those who fail to plan are planning to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that does not mean that we have crystal balls and we can forecast what the true future is going to be, because George Patton also said no plan survives first contact. But he recognized that since there is no such thing as luck, merely opportunity meeting preparedness, the best thing that we should do as professionals is come up with an initial way forward. Get an agreement with everybody in terms of how this way forward aligns with the organizational way forward. And then, on a periodic basis, you make those changes, because there may be some external environmental conditions that we had not anticipated. Who knows? Maybe we'll start getting a windfall of cash again. Okay. That doesn't mean that you waste that money on needless tactics. It's just that, guess what? The funding line just dropped. So now you can take care of the other priorities where we did not have the resources initially based on the budget that was identified and approved for the next operating year. So we're in the new operating year as we speak. Federally, it begins on the 1st of October. A lot of organizations will begin on the 1st of January. It's never too late to develop a strategic facility plan.
I love
It's
it.
never too late. You can always start the process. And since strategic planning tends to be a look forward of anywhere between 3 to 5 years, the time that you spend on it now ideally will pay dividends in the future. That's the ROI. So I've been really pressing the importance, regardless of who listened, regardless of who asked me to share it, on we need to look forward and show how facility management is a critical enabler of organizational success, not just a cost center that's ripe for cutting when folks want to reduce their operating budget.
I love that. You know, I always take notes when we chat. I do, Thomas. And I love what you said about being a critical enabler of organizations' objectives. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. We should be critical enablers. We
Absolutely.
should step up and do that. Absolutely. Wow.
And you know what's interesting on this one, Grace? I've been asked repeatedly, do I think FM should have a seat at the corporate table?
Oh,
Should
yeah.
be CFMO, along with the COO and the CIO and the CAO and the CEO. And my response is a little different. And I know we're not supposed to do this because we learned this back in school, but I answer a question with a question. Why?
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, why do we need to be there? All of the other individuals who are at that table have demonstrated a critical value so that their counsel is needed when that chief decision maker, that CEO, needs to make a decision. As long as the door is open for us, we always have a space at the table. But we need to provide value, and that's why being a critical enabler of organizational success is important. You know we're going to get the phone call if something goes wrong, whether it's 2 in the afternoon or 2 in the morning, okay? So we're there. What I'm suggesting is let's be prepared to provide that short-term and long-term value to that chief decision maker and everybody else that has an invested interest in the success of that organization. Take some time to do some strategic facility management planning so that we can show literally word for word, goals for goals, that the goal of the organization is this. Our contribution to achieving that goal is this. If an organization has 5 goal statements, guess what? We need to have at least 5.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as we do what we plan to do, if we're successful, that's going to contribute to the organization being successful.
Yeah, I love it. You need to write a book, Thomas. You do.
Well, as you know,
You do.
I have quite a few hats. Well, thank you, ma'am. As you know, I have quite a few hats, and I'm still in my doctorate studies. I'm a little more than halfway through, so I need to focus attention on that too.
Always so inspired after we chat. Always.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's like sometimes I feel like the FM industry, we haven't peaked yet. We haven't, or we're just about turning the corner when it comes to leadership. You know, so just thank you so much for sharing your inspiration, because you'll push a lot of folks. You push a lot of folks around the corner just from this talk. Thank you.
But you've always been very kind and complimentary to me. I appreciate these opportunities. You don't have to do what you do. As I had mentioned earlier, you are the voice of our industry. There aren't too many people out there who will provide a venue for individuals to hear people like me and you share our thoughts, share our concerns, and also talk about the opportunities that still await our industry. And I think you're absolutely spot on. I don't think we've peaked yet. I think there's always opportunities for improvement. I think there's some areas where FM is not as valued as it should be. Mm-hmm. As long as they're there, we will have something to contribute. We can actually help make a difference. We're not in charge, not expecting to be. You have chief decision makers of an organization to be that. But unless that organization wants to operate in the wide open spaces or underwater, you're going to have a need for folks like you and I. And thank you for providing this forum for us to share both the opportunities that are out there as well as some of the challenges that we face.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Always a pleasure. What a way to kick off the new year. I'm ready to jump back into FM.
You know there's room for you, man.
You're wonderful. Thank you so much for everything you do and sharing your passion and leadership. Just adore you. And I look forward to chatting with you again in a few months where we'll catch up and check in on you and see what's going on.
So do I. Thank you again for this opportunity. It's wonderful to hear your voice, and I look forward to continuing our conversation when that time comes.
Okay. Happy New Year. I'll talk to you soon again.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks for joining Shop Talk 360. Real conversations in the commercial design, construction, and facilities industry. You can reach out to us at grace@gracedaily.com.